and the Vietnam War combined. That's more lives lost to this virus than any other nation on earth. But as we acknowledge the scale of this mass death in America, we remember each person and the life they lived. They're people we knew. They're people we feel like we knew. Read the obituaries and remembrances. The son who called his mom every night just to check in. The father's daughter who lit up his world. The best friend who was always there. The nurse and nurses, but the nurse who made her patients want to live. I was just in Kalamazoo, Michigan, at the Pfizer vaccine manufacturing facility. There I met a man when I walked in whose father-in-law was dying of the virus. He was sad. I asked if I could call his father-in-law. He said his father-in-law was too sick to speak. But then he said, but could I pray for him? Could I pray for him? We all know someone, fellow Americans who live lives of struggle, purpose, and of hope, who talked late into the night about their dreams, who wore the uniform born to serve, who loved, played, and always offered a hand. We often hear people described as ordinary Americans. There's no such thing. There's nothing ordinary about them. The people we lost were extraordinary. They spanned generations. Born in America, immigrated to America. But just like that, so many of them took their final breath alone in America. As a nation, we can't accept such a cruel fate. While we've been fighting this pandemic for so long, we have to resist becoming numb to the sorrow. We have to resist viewing each life as a statistic or a blur or on the news. We must do so to honor the dead, but equally important, care for the living, those who left behind, for the loved ones left behind. I know all too well. I know what it's like to not be there when it happens. I know what it's like when you are there, holding their hands. There's a look in your eye and they slip away. That black hole in your chest, you feel like you're being sucked into it. The survivor's remorse, the anger, the questions of faith in your soul. For some of you, it's been a year, a month, a week, a day, even an hour. And I know that when you stare at that empty chair around the kitchen table, it brings it all back, no matter how long ago it happened, as if it just happened that moment you look at that empty chair. The birthdays, the anniversaries, the holidays without them. And the everyday things, the small things, the tiny things that you miss the most. That scent when you open the closet. That park you go by that you used to stroll in. That movie theater where you met. The morning coffee you shared together. The bend in his smile. The perfect pitch to her laugh. I received a letter from a daughter whose father died of COVID-19 on Easter Sunday last year. She and her children, his grandchildren, enter Lent this season, a season of reflection and renewal, with heavy hearts. Unable to properly mourn, she asked me in the letter, what was our loss among so many others? Well, that's what has been so cruel. So many of the rituals that help us cope, that help us honor those we loved, haven't been available to us. The final rites with family gathered around, the proper homegoing, showered with stories and love. tribal leaders passing out the final traditions of sacred cultures on sacred lands. As a nation, we cannot and we must not let this go on. That's why the day before my inauguration, at the COVID-19 memorial, at the reflecting pool on the National Mall, I said, to heal, we must remember. I know it's hard. I promise you, I know it's hard. I remember. But that's how you heal. You have to remember. And it's also important to do that as a nation. For those who have lost loved ones, this is what I know. They're never truly gone. They'll always be part of your heart. I know this as well, and it seems unbelievable, but I promise you, the day will come when the memory of the loved one you lost will bring a smile to your lips before a tear to your eye. It will come, I promise you. My prayer for you, though, is that day will come sooner rather than later. And that's when you know you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And for me, the way through sorrow and grief is to find purpose. I don't know how many of you have lost someone a while ago wondering, is he or she proud of me now? Is this what they want me to do? I know, that's how I feel. And we can find purpose. Purpose worthy of the lives they lived and worthy of the country we love. So today, I ask all Americans to remember. Remember those we lost and those who left behind. But as we all remember, I also ask us to act, to remain vigilant, to stay socially distanced, to mask up, get vaccinated when it's your turn. We must end the politics and misinformation that's divided families, communities, in the country. And it's cost too many lives already. It's not Democrats and Republicans who are dying from the virus. It's our fellow Americans. It's our neighbors, our friends, our mothers, our fathers, our sons, our daughters, husbands, wives. We have to fight this together as one people, as the United States of America. That's the only way we're going to beat this virus, I promise you. The only way to spare more pain and more loss, the only way. These millstones no longer mark our national mourning. These milestones, I should say, no longer mark our national mourning. Let this not be a story of how far we fell, but of how far we climbed back up. We can do this. For in this year of profound loss, we've seen profound courage from all of you on the front lines. I know the stress, the trauma, the grief you carry, but you give us hope. You keep us going. You remind us that we do take care of our own, that we leave nobody behind, and that while we've been humbled, we have never given up. We are America. We can and will do this. In just a few minutes, Jill and I, Kamala and Doug, will hold a moment of silence here in the White House, the people's house, your house. We ask you to join us, to remember so we can heal, to find purpose in the work ahead, to show that there is light in the darkness. This nation will smile again. This nation will know sunny days again. This nation will know joy again. And as we do, we'll remember each person we've lost, the lives they lived, the loved ones they left behind. We will get through this, I promise you. But my heart aches for you, those of you who are going through it right now. May God bless you all, particularly those who've lost someone. God bless you.
So we have been watching and listening to an event at the White House commemorating the lives lost to COVID-19. On Monday, the U.S. death toll surpassed 500,000. And as we wait for the second part of that, which is a moment of silence from President Biden, it's worth reflecting here on President Biden's own experience of grief, which he talked about there in the cross hall of the White House. President Biden himself keenly aware of the profound effects of grief, having lost his first wife and his daughter in a car accident in 1972. And then more recently, his son, Beau, died of brain cancer in 2015. We heard President Biden say, "I know what it's like to not be there when it happens. I know what it's like when you are there. That black hole in your chest," he said, "the survivor's remorse, the anger, the questions of faith in your soul." As we continue to watch these images out of the White House, there you see the South Portico, where we do expect President Biden to observe a moment of silence. The president said earlier, "I know when you stare at an empty chair at the kitchen table, it brings it all back as if it just happened. The birthdays, the anniversaries, the holidays without them, the tiny things you miss the most, the morning coffee you shared together." He went on to say, "I ask all Americans to remember. I also ask Americans to act. We must end the misinformation." And he closed by saying, "Let this not be a story of how far we fell, but of how far we climbed back up." President Biden on this day marking that 500,000 death toll there at the White House. So we're going to continue to watch as this moment of silence is set to begin at any moment now. But there you can see what has been set up there. As part of this commemoration, we are told some 500 candles have been set up on the South Portico, symbolizing the lives lost. We also saw at 5 o'clock Eastern tonight, the flag over the White House lowered to half-staff, and in fact, a presidential proclamation ordering that flags be lowered to half-staff to memorialize those lost. We also heard earlier in the afternoon the bells at Washington's National Cathedral tolling 500 times, once for every 1,000 lives lost. Let's go ahead and watch as the moment of silence proceeds. All right, the White House has been holding a moment of silence to commemorate the lives lost to COVID-19. We are going to take a quick break. Stay with us. You're streaming Red and Blue.
COVID has taken the lives of tens of thousands of Americans. Rural areas like this here on Navajo Nation are especially hit hard.
15 to 30% of our Navajo citizens don't have running water.
In any indigenous reservation, there is a shortage of physicians.
Native Americans are amongst the most vulnerable and hardest hit by COVID.
Yeah, the more we lose our elders to COVID-19, the more we lose our language and our way of life.
We need to bring awareness to the attention of Washington, D.C. and United States citizens that there is a need to focus on the first citizens of this country.
CBSN Los Angeles. Get local news, breaking news, anytime, anywhere.
It's easy to find us, and it's free.
Download the CBS News app on your favorite devices. CBSN Los Angeles, streaming 24/7. CBSN Pittsburgh, your neighborhood news, streaming 24/7. Anytime, anywhere. Find it on kdka.com and on all your favorite devices.
In 60 years, we went from about 100,000 factory workers to probably about 7,000.
Off in the distance, you can see some factories that are still humming, but most of them are just kind of abandoned.
The restaurant industry right now is one of the largest and fastest growing industries in America. And yet it continues to be the absolute lowest paying employer in the United States.
Barely anybody's making enough to live.
You're donating plasma to get by.
It's literally a slave wage.
I don't remember growing up like this. My mom didn't have to go to food banks. It's pretty sad.
Georgetown law professor Victoria Nurse joins me now with more. She worked as chief counsel to then Vice President Joe Biden in 2015 and 2016. Professor, welcome. Thanks very much for being with us. Before his Attorney General nomination, Merrick Garland was primarily known as the man whose Supreme Court nomination became a political casualty. What can you tell us about how he's expected to approach this role if confirmed?
He's the real deal. He's a real prosecutor. Before he was on the bench, as you noted, he prosecuted the Oklahoma City bombing. He said in his opening statement that he wants to be the Attorney General for the people. He is a true public servant. And so I expect him to take a very level-headed approach. He's known as a moderate generally. And I think it's a particularly poignant. It wasn't intended to be this way, but because of the attack on the Capitol, it's a great move because he actually knows a lot about domestic terrorism, and his early career, where you form your ideas as a lawyer, was based in fighting domestic terrorism. So I think that's a good sign for his future as Attorney General.
On that note, Garland vowed to prosecute white supremacists and others who participated in the deadly attack on the Capitol last month. He told senators the country is facing a more dangerous period than back when he prosecuted the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing. What sort of investigation is he promising?
Well, he can't promise any particular investigation. That would violate his code of ethics as a sitting judge, but also it would violate any prosecutor's good ethical notions. You have to look at the facts and the law. The FBI is already out there. Director Wray has a wide, sweeping investigation that was noted by Judge Garland, and he has to follow the facts wherever they go. And that included, as he mentioned, aiding and abetting, the financing, the people who, got the terrorists to Washington. So any good prosecutor is going to want to find, trace the money, find out who was involved. And I expect him to follow the facts and the law where they go.
Republicans seemed more open to Merrick Garland as Attorney General than they were for his Supreme Court nomination. What are they trying to get from him in these hearings?
Well, I think they're trying to get some promises with respect to equal application of the law. So there's been a lot of talk by Republicans about the attack on the Portland courthouse. And so he was asked, are you going to prosecute the Portland attackers? And he said, yes, of course, equal justice under law. They asked for things about protecting religious freedom. And of course, he at one point broke down because his family suffered from anti-Semitism, and he feels very strongly about that. So these are standard kind of Republican issues that they were asking him to confirm that he was not, let's say, a radical leftist, as some people have accused the Democrats of being. So they wanted to pin him down on those things, and he was pretty adamant about a variety of those things.
If I may, Professor, you were also nominated for a federal judgeship by former President Obama, only to have it eventually withdrawn after your nomination stalled in the Senate. I wonder if you could tell us what that was like for you.
Well, you know, things come around. My stall had nothing to do with the Supreme Court. Senator Johnson, I was nominated from Wisconsin, and he believed I didn't really live there, although I lived there for 25 years and taught there. He did something called a retroactive blue slip. But the thing is that life is long for those of us who have spent our careers in public service, and I've spent in both Republican and Democrat administrations. So just as Merrick Garland is getting a second chance, I got a second chance in 2015 to work for Joe Biden at a very difficult year when his son was dying. So I've been honored greatly in my career. I've had an extraordinarily lucky career. I don't hold it. I think most people in Washington don't take these things personally. There are often political wins that you have no control over. And I'm delighted to have the greatest job in the world teaching young students. But thank you for asking. It was tough at the time, but if things come around, as they've come around for Judge Garland, and I'm sure he's delighted to have the opportunity to serve as the highest law enforcement official in our government.
All right, Georgetown Law Professor Victoria Nurse. Professor, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and share your own experiences with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Have a great day.
As we mentioned, the Supreme Court has rejected a last-ditch attempt by former President Donald Trump to block prosecutors from getting his financial information. The order clears the way for a New York grand jury to obtain Mr. Trump's tax records. Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance first began investigating Mr. Trump in 2018. CBS News reporter Melissa Quinn has been following this and joins me now with more. Hi there, Melissa. So in July, the Supreme Court ruled that the subpoena of Mr. Trump's records was constitutional. So why was their release delayed until now?
Well, if you remember back in July, the Supreme Court rejected President Trump's claims that he was entitled to absolute immunity. But what the Supreme Court did say was if you want to go back to the lower courts and challenge the subpoena on the grounds that it was overly broad or issued in bad faith, you can go ahead and do that. And that's exactly what President Trump did. Him and his attorneys filed a Second Amendment complaint with the federal district court up in New York. Unfortunately for the former president, he lost at the district court level and again at the appellate court level before the Second Court of Appeals. And then back in October, the president returned to the Supreme Court to ask the justices to put that lower court ruling on hold and essentially block Cy Vance from enforcing